Fans have been upset because the Seahawks have not added to their guard group in free agency, but don't be so quick to count John Schneider out from making a big move before or during the draft to upgrade that group with a veteran presence. We're going to be looking at how trade winds could be blowing in the Pacific Northwest coming up next year on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on Blue Friday by my co-host Nick Lee, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in, whether you're in Easton, Washington, or you are tuning in down in Tucson, Arizona. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We're drawing closer and closer to the NFL draft, and as we do each and every year, Nick, it's time to begin our Draft Crushes series. Today, we are going to be doing day 2, second and third round draft crushes, and we've also got a spirited game of What's the Odds, all Seahawks draft-related topics. Going to be a really fun episode brought your way courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Now for your lead story here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. There is a growing frustration in the Seahawks fan base when it comes to the inability for John Schneider to upgrade the interior offensive line. And you can't say it's without trying this time around, because the Seahawks did make a valiant effort to get Will Fries from the Indianapolis Colts before he spurned them for the Vikings. When he decided, I don't want to wait till tomorrow to do a physical, went to Minnesota and signed that contract. The Seahawks missed out. And since then, it seems like they've had every free agent guard that's still on the market come in. But it's kind of been like the grandpa, the Simpsons grandpa, coming into the door, putting his hat down, spinning, and then grabbing the hat. These guys have been here, and then they've left, no contract. They signed with somebody else. There's a growing sense of frustration, Nick, and obviously it's understandable with how bad the offensive line has been for such a long time. But I want to make sure that fans understand, and John Schneider, if you were listening to his interview Wednesday on Seattle Sports 710, it still sounds to me like he is keeping the gears going, trying to find a quality guard that he can bring in, a veteran presence, and the trade market may be where it's at, because look, we already know the Darnold, Lawrence, and Kupp signings. They've got over $30 million still in cap space. The ability to make a trade, they've got 10 draft picks. They have 4 of them on day 2. They've got a boatload of them on day 3. The resources are there for the Seahawks to go out and get a veteran guard. And at least in my opinion, there are 2 teams that jump out where the Seahawks could make an offer and potentially bring somebody in that's going to bolster this offensive line.
I mean, the low-hanging fruit, obviously, is New Orleans, with the connection to Clint Kubiak, of course, and the immediates, from the past little bit here. And 2 names that I know we're talking guards specifically, but 2 guys I want to talk about. One, Cesar Ruiz, and the other is, as you know, I'm a center guy, Eric McCoy. We'll talk about that. Cesar Ruiz, 25 years old, very young, had played pretty much last 3 or 4 seasons as a full-time starter for the Saints. And, he's got some up and down grades, of course. And as most offensive linemen that are maybe on the trade block will, heavily right guard specific, couple snaps at center, actually played a lot of center in 2021. So a little bit of versatility there maybe, but I like his makeup a bit at right guard. And another one in New Orleans I mentioned, even though we're talking guards, center. The Seahawks really need to get a proven commodity. Now that's at center or at guard. I think the Seahawks need to get a proven commodity in the building. A veteran wrote an article about possibly David Andrews from the Patriots. Just even if he's not going to come in here and be a all-pro Pro Bowler, someone with a little name gravitas, some been there, done that in the resume. Eric McCoy, the center for the Saints, has done that. A 2-time Pro Bowler, and even though last year was cut short a bit, the Saints just dealt with a lot of injuries. With him, he had an 89.4 run blocking grade in 2023. He can pretty much do it all at center. I'm not the more I kind of look into what Oluwatimi did at center, I'm not ready to just completely pull the plug. I think that giving him maybe a chance with this new coaching staff, or at least new offensive coordinator, new system, might be beneficial. In guard, maybe you want to focus on. But if you have a chance to get Eric McCoy away from the Saints, I think you got to look into it.
Yeah, I'm especially intrigued by Ruiz because last year was obviously the only season he had played for Clint Kubiak, but it was easily the best season he's had as a run blocker. You turn on the tape, this guy's always been a gifted athlete. He was a above 9.8 relative athletic score prospect coming out of Michigan. So he is a really athletic guy that's played center. He's played right guard, had a 70.5 zone blocking grade last year in Kubiak's scheme. So there's already evidence that he can play in this scheme. And you mentioned he's 25 years old now. He signed a $44 million extension in August 2023. So a lot of fans may say, whoa, wait a second. Why would the Saints trade him? Look, New Orleans got a new coach in Kellen Moore. They just signed Dylan Radins, who Seattle actually had in for a visit before he signed with the Saints. Radins has played right guard quite a bit. So it would be a natural fit to plug him in there for a cheaper price. They've got salary cap issues. I don't care what anybody says. They have continued to kick money down the road with the credit card, and it has caught up with them. And that's why they haven't been able to compete in the NFC South. They're going to have to at some point clean things up. And I could see Kellen Moore being on board with that. Like, look, we know he's a really good player, but we have got to open up cap space at some point. And Ruiz getting back with Clint Kubiak would make a lot of sense. I think McCoy is a much bigger long shot just because to me, he seems like a guy the Saints really still want to build their team around. And he's only 27. It's not like he's an old guy. He's got a lot of good football left in front of him. Centers are incredibly valuable in this league. So I would think Ruiz is the one of those two players that you would maybe have the best chance to get. The nice thing is both these guys have multiple years left in their contract. You'd have to give up a higher draft pick to get them, but you have club control. The other team that I want to mention, you would not have that ability, but the Cleveland Browns, if you think the New Orleans Saints are in a bad position with their salary cap, the Cleveland Browns, I don't know if there's anything worse than hell, but if there is, that's where the Cleveland Browns are. And it's because of the Deshaun Watson deal mainly, the fully guaranteed contract that is just blown up magnificently in their face. They've had other deals that haven't worked out as well. They're trying to find a way to keep Deshaun Watson on the roster but not play him, so that means you got to go pay another quarterback. I mean, they are just in an abysmal situation, and they signed Tevin Jenkins, another player the Seahawks visited with, and they signed him to a multi-year deal. He's played left guard. He could probably play right guard in a pinch too. That tells me Cleveland, they've at some point got to open up some cap space. And it would actually hurt them a little bit this year, but it would open up a bunch for next season. I look at their two guards, and Joel Bitonio has been one of the very best in the NFL for a long time. Now, you look at the numbers last season, he gave up 32 pressures. That is quite a few. 3 sacks, it's not too bad when you consider what Seattle's had, but he still had a respectable 66.6 zone blocking grade. He's going to be 34, but he's still a very good player. I look at Cleveland's offensive line. This is a case where bad quarterback play can make your offensive line look really bad. And the Cleveland Browns, it has been a dumpster fire there at the quarterback position with Watson or whoever else they've plugged in, and that's hurt their offensive linemen. And I think you can also make a real argument for Wyatt Teller, who is a younger player. I mean, he's in the middle of his career. He's 30. But Wyatt Teller had a 70.8 zone blocking grade last year. He's consistently been an excellent zone blocker, is still a very athletic guy, gave up 27 pressures last year. Again, these offensive linemen have had to deal with really nasty situations at quarterback, and that hinders your blocking. I know that Wyatt Teller took out Uchenna Nwosu's knees. You'd have to talk to Uchenna about that, but look, I'm pretty sure those two could mend fences if it's, this is going to give us a better chance to compete for a Super Bowl. And Wyatt Teller's generally been a respected guy in Cleveland. So both these guys are in the last year of their deal. You can get them probably for day 3 selections. And then if you want to extend, Bitonio would be a little tougher because of his age, but Teller could be a starter for you for another 3 or 4 years. No problem. And I think the regression thing is way overblown with him because of the really bad quarterback situation. But both those guys, Cleveland's going to have to move one of them, I think. Seattle should be very aggressive trying to see if they can get one of those guys, because I think they both would fit this scheme really well.
Yeah, and I get the animosity certainly in the live chat. We're already getting it with Wyatt Teller. I completely understand that there's some venom, and rightfully so. You could probably find tweets of mine about that incident. And
I mean, Jimmy Graham had incidents with the Seahawks, though, and they
absolutely,
traded
yes.
for him. I know fans have issues. I don't blame Jimmy Graham for what happened. The Seahawks were the ones that made that trade. He still had the most productive 3 years easily by a tight end in Seahawks history. So,
yeah, and again, if Uchenna Nwosu is okay with it, why would we need to have an issue with it? I guess. But of course, that's way down the road if this even is a possibility. But if Schneider were to approach Uchenna Nwosu, who by all accounts is a fantastic human being, and says, hey, we can get Teller in the building to boost our interior line. What do you think? And he says, I'm all for it. I'm not sure there's anything else we could possibly say. So with Wyatt Teller, of course, he's a building block, possibly with his age. He's been a very well-rounded right guard. But again, I think the Seahawks, if they're going to pull something like this off, I don't want it to be for someone who is going to come in and compete, going to come in and provide depth. I want a proven commodity. And,
all four of these players would fit that.
And they are. You're right. And so that's why we're talking about these names only, because you could throw out other ones that I was looking at, for trade candidates and stuff. But really, the Eric McCoys, the Wyatt Tellers, Petonios, Ruizes, those guys that you've seen make an impact on that team. Because, if they're going to swing, especially we're going to talk about maybe trades on draft day, you're going to want to have a guy that is not only just this year, maybe a gap guy. You're going to want a guy who's a proven commodity who you can build around.
Absolutely. And that's why we're mentioning this. Again, Seattle's got 10 draft picks. They've got $30+ million in cap space. Use it. Go out and get that quality guard that can come in and instantly improve your line. And you need a veteran because this is a really young line. They need to check that box off. I think any of those four players we mentioned would be really good fits. Obviously, Teller with the Nwosu thing, notwithstanding. But look, I think Nwosu, he's always been flexible. I think Nwosu would say, if this is going to give me a chance to get a Super Bowl ring and compete in the NFC West, I don't care. Look, things happen on the field. It happens. Anyway, when we come back, let's shift gears back to the draft and let's kick off our Draft Crushes series. Now that we've had a chance to really dive deep into this 2025 draft class that I think is better than we anticipated coming in, we get to talk about some second round and third rounders that we're really fired up about heading into the draft. We'll get to that up next year on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. March Madness is well underway. FanDuel is giving you the chance to get into the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. We're halfway through the Sweet 16. A lot of really exciting games coming up today. FanDuel makes it easy to back whatever team you're rooting for with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com today and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined for today's show by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Let's talk NFL draft. Nick, it's to this point, you and I on Blue Friday, it's been mostly free agency, but we got to shift gears because we're less than a month away from the draft. It is going to be here in the blink of an eye in Green Bay. They better hope that there's not a bunch of snow. I kind of want to see it snow, like super heavy for the draft. That would be kind of a cool, like once in a lifetime type thing. But anyway, let's talk day two crushes, players that we love on day two, the second and third round. And I know that each one of us, we have one player that we just cannot stop gushing about. And I know for you, Iowa State is a program that you just seem to be gravitating to this season, but there's one player in particular that I know that you are just smitten about and hope the Seahawks can get on day two.
Well, maybe I don't know if it's because I'm more plugged into the Big 12 football with BYU being there or what. And Iowa State is kind of like that Kansas State, that Iowa, where there's just the blue collar guys that get it done.
Yep.
They don't always get the 5-star guys. They don't always get the first overall draft picks, but they got guys that get the job done. And Darian Porter, the corner, to be honest, I'm a little worried that he's going to be talked about too much. Maybe he sneaks into the first round. I don't know. But he just absolutely killed it at the combine. We're talking 97th percentile height, 98th percentile 40 time, 94th percentile broad jump, 86th percentile arm length. I mean, really, he is basically the power conference version of Rick Woolen out of college. He's just oozing with tools, as you say.
And productive.
He's kind of like, I forget at baseball, but baseball's like Ellie De La Cruz, he is just emitting tools. And that is Darian Porter at corner out of Iowa State. So getting him opposite Rick Woolen, perhaps having two Rick Woolens, basically, physically at least, on the the exterior. So you could have a guy like Devin Witherspoon bounce around, get outside, get inside, and do what he does best. And then, heaven forbid, you're not able or maybe don't want to give Rick Woolen what he's looking for, perhaps in a second contract. You got Darian Porter right there, who's maybe a plug and play replacement for Rick Woolen. So he's been a guy ever since, even before the combine, because we're talking 4.7 passer rating allowed. Are you kidding me? Yeah, that's insane. So he was a lockdown guy. The 1 year starter thing, I think, is what is scaring some people off, and maybe why he's not higher on the list. But other than that, damn good. He was really, really good. So he is easily my biggest draft crush, regardless of day.
Yeah, normally I would say that it's just one that's at the top of my list, but to me it's 1A and 1B this year because there's two guys that I absolutely love. And when he's starting offensive side of the ball, it's got to be Tate Ratledge. The guy, when I turn on the tape, his junior season in particular, last year he had an injury and he had ankle surgery. He was not quite the same guy coming back. Late in the year, he started to look like himself. In the Senior Bowl, he looked like himself. But this guy is just a menace in the trenches, just knocks dudes off the ball. He plays bully football. He's incredibly athletic, a 9.98 relative athletic score at the guard spot at 315 plus pounds. And he's known for being more of a mauler, but he clearly has the athleticism to be his own blocker. He is a 1 percentile, like a 99th percentile guy. I mean, he is a phenomenal talent. And so Tate Ratledge, in fact, he's got a mohawk and a thin mustache to go with it. Like seeing that blowing in the Lucas Oil wind, so to speak. Like he is my guy, but at the same time, he might not be my biggest draft crush. And I'm going to have a film breakdown coming on Emerald City Spectrum about this guy later today. Darius Alexander from Toledo. I loved him after coming out of the Senior Bowl, and then I turned on the tape, and I watched him against Power 4 schools. I watched him against Pittsburgh. Just absolutely one-man wrecking crew, those guys. Driving guards and tackles because he was playing outside too. He wasn't just playing 3-tech. He was playing stand-up, 2-point technique in that game and just bulldozing tackles into the backfield. He forced 2 interceptions with his pressure in that game. He might not have got sacks, but his pressure forced bad throws. He had a sack to go with that. Just absolutely, utterly dominant. And then the MAC. Look, the MAC kicks out some really good NFL players. Every year they do. Darius Alexander had a fantastic 40 time at the combine, and you see it on film. He just has that elite speed to power. They played him at the nose occasionally, and he held up fine. He can stack and shed. I just think, look, he's a guy that nobody has been talking about that I could see sneaking into the first round because he's had several seasons with more than 4 sacks. The production is absolutely on film with his ability to disrupt in the backfield. So Darius Alexander, he is maybe my biggest draft crush at this point. And I don't care if Seattle's got a bunch of stud defensive linemen. There's no such thing as too many stud defensive linemen. Add him to that group. And I think this would be a really fun one to watch.
Yeah, a guy that's different kind of player, but on defensive line for me, CJ West out of Indiana is a guy that I love his build. 8th percentile, 74th weight. I just love that. 8th percentile height, 74th percentile weight. So that's just great. But also clocked to 4.95 40, 33-inch vert. Like he's got some athletic abilities. He's quick as a hiccup inside. So he's a guy that I'm certainly looking at as well. A couple more of my crushes. Another one, speaking of guys that are disruptive, and it's on tape and on the stat sheet, Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. So I mean, he's fantastic. In fact, he's another guy that I maybe could sneak into the first round. Had a fantastic Senior Bowl week. I think he had a sack and a tackle for loss in the Senior Bowl, really stood out there. 99th percentile for broad jump, long, athletic. He's got all the athletic tools you want. Deep tool bag of pass rush moves, SEC pedigree, 13 sacks and 24 tackles for loss total the last couple years. So you got production, length, size, motor. Landon Jackson has it all. So give me some more Landon Jackson.
And he screams Mike McDonald edge. Like, I could see him being a Jadeveon Clowney type player that just absolutely throttles the run game, and he can get in the backfield and disrupt things as a pass rusher. Probably has more pass rushing upside, to be honest, because the numbers have been there for him. As far as a few other guys that stand out to me as crushes, I've talked Jaden Higgins quite a bit in the show. I'm not going to waver from my hot take. I think he is the best big-bodied receiver in this class. And I know everybody is all about Tet McMillan. He's a good player. Jaden Higgins, though, is an absolute stud. He wins jump balls. He creates separation. He's tough over the middle of the field. Hasn't had a lot of production creating after the catch, but I think there could be some upside for him there. But he is that downfield, big-bodied threat that consistently won contested catches. It has toughness. He brings run blocking to the equation as well. You know Clint Kubiak's going to want that. So Higgins is a guy that I absolutely like. I love going into this draft process. And another defensive player that I'm excited about, you mentioned Darian Porter from Iowa State. I'm going to go to the ACC with one of my studs, and it's Dorian, not Darian. Dorian Strong from Virginia Tech, another big-bodied corner, 6'1", 185 pounds, but he plays bigger than that. He is one of those guys that absolutely loves playing press coverage. He'll come up and stick you in the run game. He's got that attitude and mentality you're looking for. He's created turnovers. He's got his hands in the football. He's extremely aggressive, sometimes to a fault. He can get beat by double moves, but he has made quarterbacks pay with his instincts. Strong is a guy that has had a few small injuries over the course of his college career, but he's been very productive. I like him as a third rounder that would make a ton of sense for the Seattle Seahawks at the cornerback position.
Yeah, I got two more as well on the offensive side. So if you're looking for, I know this is very lazy, very low-hanging fruit, and I apologize, but also I don't. If you're looking for a guy who's possibly a Tyler Lockett comp, not a replacement as far as, immediate plug and play, be kind of that kind of franchise player, but just the style in which he plays, his build. Tyler Lockett is Xavier Restrepo, the receiver out of Miami. Undersized, but got very Tyler Lockett-esque kind of build and same kind of route running artist kind of. I don't know if I think I might go that far. I think he's a really, really, really good runner, route runner. So if there's a Tyler Lockett comp in this draft, I think Restrepo maybe fits that mold good. He could be your permanent slot guy to give JSN and Cooper Kupp some more versatility to bounce around to the outside. Again, you don't need 4 or 5 receivers in this kind of offense. But having a guy like Restrepo who's a building block, because you don't know how long Cooper Kupp perhaps is going to have left in his career, at least being that kind of playmaker he can be. Teaming up those two with the young Xavier Restrepo, I think would be a lot of fun. And then on the offensive line, because we got to get an offensive lineman, of course, in here. Jared Wilson, the center out of Georgia, probably a day 2, early day 3 guy. He's probably maybe only a center only prospect. Only started 1 year. Impressive combine, 90th percentile or better in the 40 time and the vert to broad jump. Just really good athletically. You can get to that second level you want as a center. So his athleticism, and obviously in the SEC having to face some really premier defenders, really held his own and thrived. I think he just maybe lacks that like true knockout punch, is why he's maybe not higher in the draft. But getting another center in there to compete with Olu, maybe bounce around the interior to see what we got there. But so Jared Wilson's a guy on the offensive line I'd look for.
And look, I can't end this segment without talking about a running back. And I understand fans are going to say, well, you've got Ken Walker, you've got Zach Charbonnet, you've got Kenny McIntosh, George Halani. I understand that. But Ken Walker III is a free agent after this year. He's battled injuries the last 2 seasons. You're going to a zone-centric offense that I'm not sure Zach Charbonnet is going to fit quite as well as he did in last year's system with Ryan Grubb, where they ran a lot of gap schemes. Kenny McIntosh is a good complementary back. I don't know that he can be the guy. This is the best running back draft class that I have ever seen, and I think John Schneider is not going to be able to resist. And quite frankly, I don't blame him with 10 picks. And if you can get DJ Giddens from Kansas State, he might be the best pure zone runner in this draft class, and that includes Ashton Genty, who, listen, they're not the same player. Ashton Genty is a generational talent. But DJ Giddens is one of those guys, and you've watched him, Nick. You follow the Big 12. The guy, he kind of reminds me of Sean Alexander a little bit because he's a bigger bodied back.
I was going to say something else.
He doesn't break a ton of tackles running over guys, but he is one of those guys that people just don't get lined up on him, and he glides and he breaks through a lot of tackles, a lot of arm tackles. Guys just don't get direct hits on him. And he is so good at knowing when cutback lanes. It's almost like he has eyes in the back of his head. Like he just knows where cutback lanes are going to be at. You got to be able to do that as a zone runner. And he can catch the ball. He's played special teams. That's a dude that can come in right away and push Zach Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh and maybe even Ken Walker. He's that kind of a player in this scheme. I think would be a great fit. So some are going to say, please don't use a day 2 pick on a running back. But if you use like pick 92 on DJ Giddens, that is a fantastic value pick for a guy that is underrated in a dominant running back draft class. When we come back, we're going to continue talking the draft. We're going to mix in a game. However, we're going to get to what's the odds with a number of Seahawks and NFL draft related topics. We'll get that up next here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Nick Lee. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Let's switch gears now. We're still talking the draft, but Nick, it's been a while since we've opened up a game period here on Locked On Seahawks. We're going to go back to one of our favorites. What's the odds? And we're going to be looking at some statements related to the draft for John Schneider and the Seahawks. And you're going to tell me what percentage chance you think that is going to happen on draft weekend. So without further ado, let's get to our first one here. Nick, what's the odds Seattle selects a quarterback before day 3? So in the first 3 rounds, what are the odds the Seahawks draft a quarterback?
If you had asked me this before that brief period between Geno Smith and Sam Darnold, I would have said a lot higher than 25%, which is what I have now. I don't see it as impossible. Mostly because, the Seahawks have other needs, and there's not a crazy ton of quarterbacks, I think, that will fall in that kind of category, because you're going to have the Cam Wards and the Shadur Sanders at the top of the first round. Jackson Dart, I think, is the wild card. Where do you put him? Is he a top 10 pick? Is he even a first-round pick? I've seen a lot of different ones. Kyle McCord and Will Howard, those kind of guys, the Dylan Gabriels, you could probably might be able to get away with waiting till day 3 on guys like that, maybe a 4th-round pick. So I'm going to go 25%.
Yeah, I'm going to go 15. I'm going to go a little lower than that. I think there's a good chance day 3 that they dip into the well and bring somebody on board to compete against Sam Howell and Jaron Hall. But I don't see early on, unless Jackson Dart free falls and you have a chance to trade back into the first and get him. I wouldn't rule John Schneider out doing that. So that's why I'm going to keep 15%. Our next one here, what's the odds, Nick, the Seahawks use their first pick on a defensive lineman? So that could be a defensive tackle or an edge rusher.
I have this pretty high, actually. I see them basically either doing that or offensive line. So 50%. You got guys like Mike Green, James Pierce, Michael Williams, Shamar Stewart, Walter Nolan, and Darius Alexander. I mean, there's a ton of options there with their first pick. And maybe I could cheat a little bit and say maybe their first pick isn't 18. Maybe it's at 25. Who knows? But yeah, I'm going to go 50% just because the needs are there, and I think the prospects really line up just where the Seahawks are sitting at right now.
I'm going to go 66%. I'm going to say it's a 2/3 chance because this is the deepest defensive tackle class that I have ever seen in terms of having both top tier, upper echelon talent, and you can get starter caliber players on day 3. So some would argue, well, why not just wait till day 3? But if you can get Kenneth Grant or somebody like that at pick 18, that can come in and just be an absolute game wrecker. It can also play nose tackle. Look, those players are invaluable in today's NFL. If you can get a nose that can also rush the passer and has the ability to destroy game plans, you go get that guy. And there's a ton of edge rushers in this class. Boy Mafe is a free agent next year. Uchenna Nwosu could be potentially out after this year. That is a position of need beyond 2025, and you can never have too many edge rushers to begin with. So I think there's a very high chance they do that with their first pick in the first round, whether it's 18 or trading down or trading up. I think those are two of the deepest positions in this draft class. Third one here, Nick. What's the odds John Schneider uses at least 3 picks on the offensive line? I know fans are hoping for a very high percentage on this one, but
if this was a fan-driven draft or a Nick Lee-driven draft, this would be a 100%. But it's not. It's a John Schneider draft, a Seahawks draft. And if this was used 2 picks on offensive line, I would say like 85%. But if it's 3 on offensive linemen, I'm going to go, let's go 35%. I do think they're going to address the offensive line more than once. Doing it more than twice, given the other needs they have, and just given just the sheer stubbornness or just refusal to make the fan base happy. I don't know what it is with the offensive line. I just don't see them. I don't see that as a more likely than not chance. So let's go just slightly less than 50%.
I'm going 5%. I know that might seem really
Charlie
low.
the Unicorn on there too.
But listen, Seattle, the strategy they're employing right now is built around the fact that John Schneider thinks that the coaching staff, the new staff, can get the most out of these players. They've used 7 draft picks on offensive linemen the last 3 years. They've those guys on the roster right now. They're going to develop them. I can't see John Schneider. And honestly, I get it. Like, I would not use 3 picks in the offensive line unless you just have somebody fall that you're like, look, I can't skip this guy. I think 2 is probably the sweet spot. I wouldn't be shocked if they only pick 1 and it's fairly early. And then they say, all right, we upgraded interior, we're moving on. And I would not be shocked by that. So I'm going to go really low percentage, 5%. Our next one, Nick, what's the odds Seattle trades up in the first round from 18 overall? I don't know that they've ever done this during the John Schneider era. I know they've traded up in the second round several times, but I don't know that they've ever done it in the first.
That's, yeah, the historical context here will lead me to be, let's say, 12% for the 12s here. I'll go 12%, not impossible. Obviously, the right guy could fall to 13, 14, 15. If a guy, I don't know, like today, Barron or Abdul Carter, with that surgery, who knows? That'd be kind of nuts. Armand Membu is a guy that is starting to get up a little bit, I think, higher. Will Campbell, yeah. So guys that, once they start flirting with 15, maybe he'll get an itchy trigger finger, but no, that's just not in his DNA. It hasn't been. So I'll go 12%.
I'm going to go 25% because the Seahawks have 4 picks on day 2. And I could see John Schneider being willing to move those if the right guy's there to really upgrade his offensive line, or if an elite pass rusher is available there. Those are just incredibly valuable. And I could see him saying it's worth me giving up one of those picks on day 2 to slide up. So I don't think it's a high probability, but I certainly think against historical odds, I think that there's a better chance maybe than some people would anticipate. What's the odds the Seahawks make at least 2 draft weekend trades? They only had 1 last year, Nick, but historically, John Schneider's traded more than that on draft weekend.
Given the firepower they've got with with their activity of the last few weeks, I'm going to go 75%. I think that whether that could be a trade down, trade up, a mixture, I think they can at least. I think they'll at least make 2 trades. John Schneider, as you mentioned, has in the past, not as much last year. Maybe that was a McDonald thing, or maybe they're working in tandem, and maybe that's not something that McDonald needs and wants as much. But with Schneider at the helm, it's been a very active draft trading environment, and I think that's going to continue. Give me 75%.
I'm going 90% on this because, look, John Schneider's got 5 picks in the first 92. You cannot tell me that he's not going to be, and we talked about this with trading for a player, a veteran player. That's a possibility, but I can't see any way that he's not bouncing up and down the board in this because of the draft capital that he's got. I just cannot see. I can't envision a path where he's trading only 1 time or none. To me, this is 2+, absolutely going to happen. I almost went 100% of that one. Our next one, what's the odds Seattle winds up with 2 first-round selections? They pick at 18. We know they have 4 picks on day 2. What are the odds that John Schneider does trade up in the first round, but it's to get a second pick late in the round?
The more I thought about this, the more I thought that maybe there is a chance with just the artillery that he has in day 2. I originally had it at 10. I'm actually going to go 30% just because of that just sheer firepower that he has at his disposal to make a trade up. And yeah, we're not saying he's going to trade up to a top 10 pick. We're maybe saying, like you said, pick at 18, sneak back into the late rounds. One of my favorite fantasies is maybe sneaking into the first round and getting a guy that maybe is a fringe day one or round 2 or 3 guy, and getting that first round pedigree so you can have that 5th-year option as, sneaking into the 31st, 32nd slot. So yeah, I'm going to say maybe slightly less than 50%, but I don't think it's out of the question.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 40%, right around the same area as you, just because of all the ammo they've got in. Look, we were seeing reports a month ago that, there's only 12 or 13 first-round caliber players. I think that is incredibly low based on what we've seen now. I think you could make an argument that there's 5 or 6 defensive tackles that are first-round caliber guys in this draft. To me, this is a better draft than what was anticipated as guys have gone through it. So I can see John Schneider, if there's the right guy there. If Nick Emanuwari, for example, falls to the end of the first round, Mike McDonald might be the one saying, like, I'm leaving if you don't make this move to go get my guy. So I think there's a chance that it happens here. All right, we've got one more real quick, Nick. What's the odds Seattle uses 7 or more of the picks they have on the offensive side of the football?
It's a lot of picks, especially when, there's no guarantee they're going to stay at 10 picks or, have that many picks. So that's a lot of cachet on the offensive side of the ball. So I'm going to go 35%, just because it's not like there aren't needs on defense. Like we've talked about defensive line, the expiring contracts at corner, at linebacker, they maybe want to upgrade. So I think there's enough there to not go completely, like, almost ignore the defense on the draft. So I'm going to go 35%. That it's that many of the offensive picks.
I'm going to go 20% here. I think it's possible, but as you mentioned, there's plenty of needs on defense, and you have a defensive-minded head coach. Like, I can't see Mike McDonald being like, you know what, let's use 7 or 8 picks on offense. And they've reinforced a lot of the positions with free agency there. So I don't see him going that heavy. It could be a 50-50 thing, maybe 6-4 if you keep your 10 picks, but 7 is really rich on offense. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick at Nick Lee 51. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we return on Monday, the league meetings are going to be underway. We're going to be taking a deep dive into some of the new rule changes that may or may not be implemented, how those could impact the Seahawks going into 2025, and much more. Make sure that you're listening in. Thanks for tuning into our Blue Friday show. Go Hawks.